the right place to start is the game, because that was how we all started our day on Saturday. And Michigan beating Ohio State, I think we were all curious. Anybody around the college football world, and certainly fans of the sport, were curious what this was going to look like. No Jim Harbaugh. Final game, he was serving the 3-game suspension. And Michigan, it was a vintage Michigan performance from what we've seen really the last 3 years from that team. The toughness came out. The way they could finish it came out. The extended drives, the running game came out when necessary. J.J. McCarthy made some big-time plays. He had that dot of a throw that was almost an interception that turned into a touchdown. That was wild. But all of it led to a 30-24 win. The entire 110,000 plus tried to storm the field at the Big House. I mean, that was what college football was all about. And for the Big Ten, it was the culmination of another really exciting season.
Yeah, it was a great football game, and I know there's Ohio State fans that are upset and maybe upset with Ryan Day and, whatever, but Ohio State played a heck of a football game, and they called a good game. They played a good game. They were much better and much more competitive in this one than they were the last 2 years, know. But at the end of the day, there were still a couple things that stood out to me. Number one, and this rivalry has been kind of dictated over the last number of years. Whoever wins the rushing battle wins the game. All right. And Michigan outrushed them. It wasn't by as dramatic of a margin as it was in the previous 2 years, but they still outrushed them by about 60 yards. And then who wins the turnover battle? Michigan did not have a turnover, and Kyle McCord had 2 very costly interceptions. The first one gave Michigan a short field and led to the first touchdown. And of course, the last one sealed the game when he was hit by Jalen Harrell. I mean, the first one was his mistake. The second one, really, I mean, he got hit right as he was throwing the football, and there was no way to get around that. So, but that's what determined the game. And then the third thing to me, Noah, is I was so incredibly impressed by Sherrone Moore. I mean, 2 weeks ago when he took over in his first job as the interim head coach at Penn State, he made the very wise decision, realizing they were going to have trouble blocking the pass rushers that Penn State had. And we saw them Friday night on full display. And he said, you know what? We're going to get big and we're going to run the ball at them. And they ended up running the ball 30 times consecutively and won the game. Plus, J.J. McCarthy was a little nicked up, okay? In the game Saturday, the biggest game of the season for both teams, he was very aggressive.
Yeah.
Right? Now, Michigan in the game, they were only 3 of 12 on third down, which is 25%, but 3 for 3 on fourth down. He went for it 3 times on fourth down, successful all 3 times. 2 of them runs. One was a touchdown run by Blake Corum, and the other one was a pass by J.J. McCarthy, a gutsy call. He called a halfback pass by Donovan Edwards at a critical point in the game. I just thought he was on point. He was aggressive and did a great job of not only leading the team in Jim Harbaugh's absence, but calling a masterful game.
So you made the point, Nicole Auerbach, our college football insider, if you follow her on Twitter, she definitely has a lot of insightful things to say. I thought she made the same point, and it's 100% correct, because in many situations when you're filling in for a guy like Jim Harbaugh, a lot of the tendencies would be just to be very, all right, we're going to manage the game. We're going to be very conventional in how we do it. We're going to rely on what we do. To your point, he was aggressive and he understood what was at stake. He understood what they needed to do to defeat a team and a defense that had played so well. And look, there's a lot that could happen from now into next season and beyond. If Jim Harbaugh were to leave the program, if he were to go to the NFL, I think a lot of people were already looking at Chiron Moore as one of the guys or one of the candidates that be in that running. I think he sealed that fate, that whenever Jim Harbaugh does decide to leave, if that happens, Chiron Moore is there and he's ready to become the next head coach, because it wasn't even just how he handled the play calling. It wasn't even how he called the game overall. It wasn't his demeanor. I thought it was how he handled the moment entirely. Because think about any coach, any young coach. This is a guy who's 37 years old, running out onto the field, getting interviewed pregame, all the juices that are flowing. We saw the emotion he had after the Penn State win. To see how much he's matured already in the 3 weeks, I think has been just as impressive as anything as well.
Yeah, and and the other thing to keep in mind, and I know this because my dad was an offensive line coach for years and years. It's, it's one of the hardest positions to coach because you've got 5 guys playing and they have to be on the same page and in orchestra and in cohesion. And so he's also the offensive line coach. Now I'm sure he's gotten help, with some other people on the staff as he's taken over the head coaching role, but he still wants to have input with his offensive linemen. And, here's the other thing that stood out to me. And again, I'm not saying that Michigan is a tougher team than Ohio State. I think the last 2 years, I thought they were better and more physical in the line of scrimmage. I thought it was more of a toss-up this year. I really thought Ohio State came to play and they were physical, but Michigan was just a little better. And, when they won at Penn State and we saw Blake Corum at the end of the game with the blood on his nose and, he looked like he came out of, what was the movie?
He looked like a gladiator, right?
Yeah, Gladiator. What was the other one that Mel Gibson was in?
Braveheart.
Braveheart. Yeah, it looked like he's from Braveheart, right? So anyway, that epitomized him and that team and their toughness. In this game, such a tragic moment when Zach Zinter got hurt. One of the guys that came back for this moment to play in that game, could have been a first-round draft pick last year, comes back and suffers a gruesome injury. One that's so bad they won't even show the replay of it. I just read the account where Carson Barnhart, the right tackle, was holding his limp foot, as the trainers were coming out. Yeah. And even the Ohio State defensive linemen were moved and concerned. And, there was just that moment of sportsmanship that was incredible, but just a huge loss for Michigan, right? And the very next play, Blake Corum runs 22 yards for a touchdown and flashes the 6'5", for his fallen teammate. To me, again, I love the kid. I love Blake Corum. I've loved covering him, getting to know him, watching him play, watching how unselfish he is. And to me, that epitomized Michigan again in that game and in this season.
No question. Real quick on the Ohio State side, obviously disappointment for Ryan Day. If you watch the interviews that Fox did with him before this game leading up to it, you could tell how much it meant to him. You knew how much it meant to the team. To your point, they played very well. They put themselves in positions to potentially win the game, to drive it down the field at the end of the game and get a touchdown to win it. They're not done here. No. There's a chance, like similar to last year, it feels eerily similar in a lot of ways. If things break right, because let's just think about last year for a second. If USC beats Utah in the Pac-12 championship, there's a real good chance they get in over Ohio State last year into the college football playoff. I think it's similar this year, right? Where you look at, what goes on in the Pac-12? What happens in the ACC championship? What happens in a variety of these conferences or the SEC championship certainly as well, especially what happened in the Iron Bowl. Ohio State's going to need some things to fall in their place, but there's a chance they get in. And if they get in, based on how much better their defense is this year, they have as good a chance to win the entire thing as anybody in the country.
Yeah, I think so. Now, I do think that they're going to need a lot of help this year. They're going to need 3 or 4 things to happen, that would break their way. But that doesn't take away from what kind of team they have. And, I thought their running game got better when Travion Henderson got healthy. That touchdown drive they had in the third quarter to tie the game up, it was primarily done just pounding the football right at Michigan's defense and running with toughness and strength. And the only thing that I would say is I think Marvin Harrison had 5 catches for 118 yards and a touchdown. I would have tried to find a way for him to have 10 catches in the game. He was the best player on the field, and I feel like in some ways he was kind of underutilized in the game.